The big story that we are tracking. The Himalayas are facing a fresh warning, and this time the focus is on water, infrastructure and its fragile ecology in the Tibetan Plateau. A significant barrier lake has formed near the confluence of the Chhochen, Khola and the Purepu Tsangpo rivers in Nepal. And according to China's Ministry of Water Resources, the situation could become critical over the next 3 days. The lake is already holding an estimated 2 million cubic meters of water and is overflowing. Another 3 million cubic meters would flow into it after the next 3 days. This raises the risk of breach and potentially a sudden flood downstream. Chinese authorities are now monitoring the lake closely and running flood simulations to prepare for a possible breach. This comes after the devastating mudslide on the Nepal side of the China-Nepal border struck at the Gyurong port near the China's Xinjiang Autonomous Region. Now, the disaster has already left 3 people dead and rescued, and hundreds are in fact missing, according to the Chinese authorities. But this latest incident also brings attention back to much bigger issue. China's expanding footprint across Tibet and what it could mean for the Himalayan ecosystem and downstream countries, including India. For Beijing, Tibet is not simply a remote plateau. It is a strategic high ground with an average elevation of more than 4,000 meters. It is also the source from the region for some of the Asia's major rivers, including the Brahmaputra, Indus, Sutlej, Mekong, Yangtze and Yellow River. That makes Tibet what is often called Asia's water tower. And China's infrastructure push across the region is enormous. Road networks in the Tibet Autonomous Region stretch for more than 1.2 lakh kilometers. Railway projects are connecting the plateau more rapidly with the Chinese mainland. Airfields and border infrastructures are also being expanded. Remember, all this has got an element, that is concrete and steel. China has established more than 600 so-called well-off border villages along the sensitive frontier areas, strengthening its presence close to the line of actual control. And then there is the hydropower push. China is planning massive projects at the Great Bend of the Yarlung Tsangpo or Brahmaputra, with a proposed capacity of around 60 gigawatts. Supporters see these projects as infrastructure and development. But environmental experts have repeatedly warned that Tibetan Plateau is an extremely fragile ecosystem. It is the warming at roughly 2 to 3 times the global average rate. Permafrost is thawing. Glaciers are retreating, and unstable glacial lakes are increasing the risk of glacial lake outburst floods, sudden floods, and can send huge volumes of water downstream. Now, large dams can also alter the river flows and trap sediment that could naturally replenish downstream ecosystems. And when you combine climate change with roads, railways, mining, and large-scale construction, the risks become even more complex. Now, to discuss about this, we have with us Sriram Subedi, a senior journalist who's joining us from Nepal, Madan Nupane, tourism expert also from Nepal, Raghu Murtugude, climate expert, and Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, who's also a defense expert as well. Let us in fact ask the senior journalist from Nepal, Sriram Subedi. Sriram,
yes.
Situation is very complex along the Nepal-Tibet border, Tibet controlled by China. You have a land port area also, and a lot of bridges were built so that trade and commerce could also happen. But from the Tibetan Plateau, the Karakoram ranges, the Himalayan ranges, this is a huge, sensitive ecological structure, geological structure. Of course, trade should happen, but is it happening at the risk of the environment? And probably, are we building projects on these sensitive ecological centers without realizing that the impact on this is severe?
Thank you very much. You raised the right questions. As we stand now, the incidents that happened yesterday is historic in nature. Is hundreds of lives lost, properties worth billions have been damaged, especially the infrastructure, the bridges, and so many hydropowers as well on the corridor of Trisuli River. So yes, how we develop and compromise with the environment and development is a very critical questions. And especially when there is a river that are fed by the glacial fade coming from the Himalayas, and the impact that the Himalayan region, the entire Himalayan region, Hindu-Kush Himalayan regions, in which Nepal is at the center as well, has a tremendous impact by climate change. And the ice is the melting, the glacial lakes are, there is a huge chances of bursting, and then the number of glacial lakes is also increasing. So the whole ecosystem of the Himalayas, the highland ecosystem is eroding, and there is a concern for the entire region, not only for Nepal, China, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, all of the South Asia regions, which heavily rely on the Himalayan water, we are impacted. And talking about your issue, that since the billions of dollar hydropower projects that Nepal rely on, as Nepal also has begun exporting hydropower to India as well, as it is maximizing internal use of hydropower.
Exactly that
This
I
the
wanted to in fact ask about the where the tragedy has occurred. This particular river, if you look from a hydroelectric generation point of view, it's got several points at which you can actually set up hydro electrical projects, in the sense that you can set up several stations because it's got several reaches. So you can actually generate a lot of electricity only from this river. And it
that's
is
true.
geologically placed in such a way that hydrological projects can be brought in. But that's not the only thing. It's also highly sensitive, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. When you, when you have a project, you can't see just in 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, or 20 kilometers upstream. You have to see at the landscape level. You have to see where the rivers originated. You have to see the sensitiveness of the high land from where the river is originating. So this is what beyond the current projects are doing, because they have environment assessment, they have some risk mitigation, but that is not at par to the current crisis, our accelerating crisis that the climate change, the melting glaciers, and so many other factors are contributing to.
All right. We have with us Raghu Muthugure. I'll come to you, Raghu Muthugure. I just wanted to ask this. There's heavy construction activity. A lot of dual use infrastructure has come in the Tibetan region. Now, these dual use structures are, of course, your airfields. You have highly placed railway networks, roads. Now, they are all infrastructure that has got concrete and it's got steel involved in it. They're all going to absorb heat, isn't it? And how bad is it when such huge infrastructures are going to absorb heat, and then you have the permafrost being thawing beneath it as well? So, in fact, is it possible to have such huge infrastructure in a place like this, especially in Tibet? Because these infrastructure, are they heat trapping infrastructure that has led to this glacial melts and these glacial lakes rising?
I think every time these things happen, we always have retrospective analysis and try to figure out how many things were done wrong. But you have to remember mountain slopes and steep rivers in the mountains are intrinsically vulnerable. So when you say, is climate change causing something, you have to remember everything is happening in a much warmer world. So climate change is adding something to everything. Secondly, when we build in such steep areas and sensitive areas, we are increasing the vulnerabilities. So building on mountain slopes naturally loosens up everything, and you are going to make the situation worse at some level. Then you hit some threshold. So the climate context right now is that we have El Nino and global warming. And if you look at temperatures from Europe to China, including Tibet, they are cooking for almost 2 months now with temperature anomalies of 7, 8 degrees. This is a recipe for cracking glaciers or cracking open gloughs. The map of gloughs shows that there are hundreds of glacial lakes that are vulnerable to such a thing. So it's a combination, and risk is never zero. But that doesn't mean we can keep building as we want. On the other hand, we need risk maps at local scales. Nobody said specifically that this particular river was vulnerable at this time, but it has a history of flooding. 25 had a flooding, before that several times. So it's not like we don't expect floods here. Just the magnitude is so shocking that we are questioning everything now. But in general, we are raising vulnerabilities of this region by a lot.
Well, all right. Now, let me in fact get in Lieutenant General retired Sanjay Kulkarni, who joins us on the show. Lieutenant General, here the big question is China is not going to stop building. They're going to keep building all this infrastructure across Tibet because they believe that Tibet should be fortified. Tibet is considered as that bulwark fort in case there is any geopolitical challenges that stops any kind of an enemy thrust into China and into Han China. Let's understand that there is a huge strategic planning when it comes to fortifying Tibet, and therefore they are not going to stop from building in Tibet. Now, the issue over here is not only the military infrastructure, they are bringing in their mines, they are degrading the entire Tibetan plateau to a large extent. Now, if this degradation continues, coupled with military infrastructure and building, they have built huge rail networks, they've built huge road networks. This is too strategic for them to not stop building, isn't it? And probably in India, we are probably looking at a leverage of sort on our waters because we are the downstream countries, and probably China could have a huge leverage with these infrastructure projects in a very ecologically sensitive zone.
Yeah, definitely. First and foremost, extremely sorry to see what has happened in Nepal. Unbelievable. And I can understand because I've been a witness to the cloudburst in Ladakh. So I know what it really means when so much of, water suddenly disperses and destroys, you lose lives, and everything is totally very difficult to manage. Notwithstanding that, we just take this particular case in mind first, and then we'll discuss the other thing. Yes, Tibet is being fortified. Yes, a lot of infrastructure activities are under Tibet. Yes, Tibet is the repository of water. Water from Tibet does flow into the Bay of Bengal, flows into the Arabian Sea, flows into the East China Sea, flows into the South China Sea, flows into the Andaman. So many countries in and around are dependent on water which emanates from Nepal and drinking water, that too from Tibet. No denying the fact. Yes, China is weaponizing it, can weaponize it. I won't say it is weaponizing it as of now, but can weaponize it. China has taken on itself constructing the largest dam to produce 60 gigawatts of electricity. If one understands what it really means, 60,000 megawatts of electricity from one dam, the Great Bend Dam. India today, 2026, does not produce electricity as much as that one dam is going to produce in China. So that's the difference, and that's the kind of infrastructure activity that's taking place. Yes, it has a railway line coming right from Beijing to Lhasa and coming right closer to the Nepalese border, Shikatse and all over. Yes, there is no denying the fact. But despite all that, this particular event which has now happened, to point fingers at China at this point of time for this particular thing, may be a little too preemptive, because this is a global warming effect. This is due to the permafrost. This is because of the glacial shift which happens. And because there are 4 hydroelectric projects of Nepal. Nepal now today suffers 18% of its energy, electricity gone, because all of them are dependent on this water which was flowing in down the riparian state. However, what happens, even the loss of life, there are 50,000 people who stay in this particular district of Nepal of ours. You can imagine it. Unlike where it is in China, the county is 9,500 square kilometers with a population of 18,000. That to 90% of the population, only in 2 small localities at 4,200 meters, as you rightly said, 4,000 meters is the average height of the Tibetan Plateau, and therefore they were not affected, and most of it affect is the one. Why most of it? Because we are the one from Lipu Lake, across from this thing, from Uttarakhand, all the tourists and traffic is flowing down to your Mount Kailash. So everyone is going that way. Easier to access Mansarovar from this way, little cheaper vis-a-vis going down from Sikkim side. So all that is there. So, but these activities, yes, no doubt. But to blame anybody right now at this point of time that China may have done it, China may have triggered it, no chance. I doubt very much Even if it could be the best of experts who could tell me that China can trigger such a thing. Not possible.
We're not saying
Yes,
China could trigger this thing. I mean, what we're trying to say is that there is global warming. There is global
yes.
warming that we have to accept. There is global warming. That is a factor.
Absolutely.
But when you aggravate it with infrastructure projects like this, that especially when you use a lot of concrete, when you use a lot of steel for such huge infrastructure projects, they are heat trapping mechanisms in a place which is supposed to be cold. And already it only aggravates the heat in the area. So we're not saying that China decided to, one day go ahead and, create a problem. But the years of infrastructure project that's happening in Tibet is making the glaciers melt, and that is a concern that we all have to in fact look on, especially when it comes to the lower riparian states. So this is the concern that we are raising about it, because already there's a warming effect. Probably it's aggravating the entire thing. Yes, General, sorry, I interrupted your thoughts.
It does act as a catalyst, but what's happening in Antarctica then? What's happening in the Arctic region then?
Right. We are now, in fact, also joined in by Madan Nupane, who's tourism expert as well. Madan Nupane, now, a lot of tourists from India, from across the world, visit this ecologically fragile area. And, a lot of tourists, in fact, use Nepal also to probably cross over to Tibet as well. There is a lot of tourism in that area that's happening. We were talking about how infrastructure is coming for tourism, for the military infrastructure is there first when it comes to China and Tibet. We're also talking about even tourism infrastructure coming in, because there is a huge market for that as well. But all this is happening in a very ecologically sensitive zone. The melting part is becoming higher. How do you in fact see this?
Actually, this infrastructure is not very good for tourism. However, those rivers, they have very, very good potentiality for hydroelectricity, because we are also fighting against the carbon energy, and we are turning into the green energy. That's why in this area, the hydroelectricity power plants, they are under construction. This affect little bit in tourism. However, what the disaster happened this yesterday, it is from, I think this is not from the construction. Actually, this is from the global warming. There is few medias. This afternoon also I was talking about this. They were objecting this disaster can be caused because of the construction, but I don't believe, because of this construction, from far away from the construction area, like let's say 150 kilometers away, these things happen. I don't know, I don't believe these things. However, in tourism, that affect badly. This is not nice, but the potentiality of hydroelectricity we have in this river. The current of river is very high, so through the small efficiency we can get the high power in this river. That's why there is quite more electricity consumption, electricity power plants consumption. There is more or less 14 ongoing hydropower projects in this area. That's it.
But Madan, I'll just take you through what the Global Times has put out. The Global Times have said that according to the Ministry of Water Resources, the situation could become critical over the next 3 days. They say that the lake barrier, or there's a lake that has formed over there, the lake is already holding an estimated 2 million cubic meters of water and is overflowing. What you've seen could be the overflowing water right now, and it's still holding, and water is still entering that place. They say that another 3 million cubic meters could flow into that lake, and this raises the risk of a breach and potentially a sudden flood downstream. Now, this is according to the Global Times that China has put in. Now, this has come after there's been a lot of criticism asking what was happening on the other side, because when the disaster happened in Nepal, we knew what was happening in Nepal. We knew that there were people who had died, people had gone missing. China only later came up and said what is happening on their side. 265 people missing, 3 people have died. And even now, those estimates are going to change, is what we understand. After a lot of criticism saying that something happened from China's side, is when the Global Times, in fact, put out this, saying that there is a lake that is breaching its banks, and this was an overflowing lake's water that has resulted in the disaster that's happened in Nepal. And already it is kind of a ticking lake time bomb is what they are saying, because water is still flowing into it and there's a high risk of breach in the next 72 hours or so. So clearly there is something that's happening on the other side of the border, which probably none of us are aware of because of the secret nature of what's happening on the other side of the border. And after a lot of criticism, and probably even in the Nepali media, they were in fact speaking about it, and that's why this probable statement, or rather article, was put out in the Global Times as such. Well, in fact, let's get our expert on the climate as well. How do you in fact see permafrost as something that could keep the water levels stable? And upsetting it, what does it mean?
Yeah, actually, the Himalayas are not a very rich permafrost region.
Okay.
Much more in Siberia, Alaska, and so on. But what is happening is that the glaciers, which are covered with debris, they are generally less immune to melting if the debris cover is very thick. But if debris cover is thin, then they become, they absorb a lot of heat and accelerate the melting. But what this crisis should really help us do is to realize, as you said, China is suffering, Nepal is suffering, India will get hit as well. So this needs a regional coordination. Nobody is immune from the net impact of human activities and climate change, which are closely related also. So we need to create maps of risks on either side, because any vulnerability of Nepal, which is relatively small and poor, is not only our vulnerability, but it's a national security risk. And it's the same for China. So nobody should fool themselves to think that they will build as they want or trigger disasters and get away with it. That's not possible. Other point to remember is that when Bangladesh or Pakistan flood, they also point fingers at us. So nobody is really immune from this kind of blame game and a combination of global warming and now El Nino and infrastructure, unplanned growth, etc., making everybody vulnerable. So we have to take all the lessons from this and plan on the actions in the coming years and really get past, use the discussions going on between India and China now to resolve these sorts of issues as well.
All right. Sriram Subedi, in fact, joins us as well. Sriram Subedi, now, one clear factor is there that the three countries need to have a common framework on the rivers that are emanating from Tibet. There are rivers that are moving from China to Nepal and then to India. So we need to have a clear understanding of river sharing data. There is probably a system in place already, especially when it comes to the sharing of river water, as the Yarlang, Tsangpo, the Brahmaputra, and other rivers as well. But it seems to be not like a robust system. Otherwise, we would have had some kind of fore-alert. Is there a possibility that all the three countries can come together for an early warning system, I think, which is lacking as of now with regard to this disaster? This disaster, in fact, points out to the fact that we need an early warning system, and we need something now where all the three countries can cooperate on that. How do you, in fact, see that kind of a system being put in place?
Very, very important questions that you have raised. And as you know, that the disaster defy borders, because disaster doesn't know which political boundaries it is having an impact. And the tragedy with the South Asian context is that the water information, hydrological and meteorological information that should be in place, it happened as and when required, or in a bit and piece basis. There is no system of a collaboration. There is no permanent system of sharing knowledge, especially on very fragile hydrological situation there in the Himalayas. So I think what the need of the hour is that we should not take it as a political agenda, because the sharing of information of water is more of a strategic and political agenda in South Asia. So I think in case we come beyond the political agenda and work for the people and the places, because as Nepal case is the wake-up call. This is not only the case for Nepal, this can happen anywhere, because it has happened in the high Himalayas, it has happened due to the global warming, it has happened due to the larger regions that the historically China and India is less responsible of, though they are the largest emitters of carbon in the current time. But historically, the global warming and the melting of glaciers is by the West, the US and the Europe. And so I think we should be taking care of the historical injustice that has been done to our Himalayas and taking besides the political agenda in between China, Nepal, Bangladesh, and India, we should be honestly assessing whether we are sharing the required information that will be so critical to save people and the infrastructure that are very critical for the region.
Right. I'll give the last answer to Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Sanjay Kulkarni, after seeing the disaster that's happened, after knowing about various factors that are involved in this, how should we in fact approach this matter strategically when it comes to India-Nepal relations and vis-a-vis with China, as well as when it comes to an early warning system? You know, there are sensitivities involved in this. How do you think should India approach this matter? Because we are all affected at the end of the day.
100%. We are all affected. Sharing of information is a must. Technologically, all of them must be equipped. After tsunami, we saw how much of information we are ourselves gather. We can make to others that there's a possibility of a tsunami, because all these natural disasters do give us a little bit of a warning before they really occur. Whether there's a tectonic shift or seismic shift, whatever it may be. Yes, sharing of information, very, very important. The interest of the lower riparian states must be kept in mind. The higher riparian states cannot just do what they wish to do in terms of infrastructure, primarily because the effect is there. Now, like you see in this particular instance, the Chinese county people are occupying heights which are over 4,200 meters, whereas on the Nepalese side, they're all in the valley. So you found all the water flowing in the valley, which is bound to happen because water takes the course which is the easiest to follow. So now you find the population on the Nepalese side very large, 50,000. On the Chinese side, only 18,000. And that one area spread over 9,500 square kilometers on only two pockets which are at 4,200 meters. So Chinese have had very little law. Most of the loss of lives on the Chinese side are the Indians who are there for Mount Kailash trip. It is they. So possibly they could be double counting on this side or that side, but they're mostly Indians who have died over there. So there's a lot that can be done, and we need to be, the nature's fury, it cannot be controlled unless until human greed has to be stopped. The human greed is so much that the nature will ultimately do what it was not supposed to be doing, because if it is going out of control, temperatures are rising, you find all these kind of infrastructure development coming up, aircrafts flying in, so many things that keep happening there, a railway line coming in, so much of human activity, when they start taking place at places which generally wouldn't be inhabited by people, just because of technology that people are able to stay there, doesn't mean we go against the nature. The nature must be respected. We must ensure that equally the resources must be shared amongst each other, and information sharing is very, very important. And this kind of a catastrophe, I think, is something that must open the eyes of the world, that it can happen anywhere, any place. Look at the kind of water destruction that can be caused, and we must be careful and let it not happen again, because we are all affected by it. I would say that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Thank you, gentlemen, for in fact joining us and giving a very insightful discussion on what exactly can be done. This disaster is something that has opened all our eyes. It is something that we have to in fact learn from. Condolences to the people and their families who have lost their loved ones, and hope next time there is an early warning system that would be put in place that could serve the people. Thank you, gentlemen, for in fact speaking to News 9 on this.